Good evening, and welcome to the Miracle of Prosperity here on the New Thought Media Network. I'm your host, Reverend Jim Webb, author of the book The Soul of Prosperity, as well as several others, including Prosperity from A to Z, 30 P's for Prosperity, and one that is quite popular around this time, Create Your Self-Manifesting Vision Board. On this show, we often discuss many of the aspects and facets of prosperity, for there are many. As you know, prosperity is more than just money and stuff. Prosperity may take many forms, because prosperity is simply any way that God's love shows up and is made manifest in our lives. So one of the ways that God's love can show up is in the form of professional prosperity, where, in the words of Florence Scovel Shinn, we have a wonderful job with wonderful pay, where we provide a wonderful service in a wonderful way. Another way prosperity may show up is in terms of spiritual prosperity, where we find deep within a well of peace and love, the peace that passes all understanding, no matter what's going on in our outer world. It may mean physical prosperity, where our lives work well, easily and effortlessly, where there is less struggle, conflict, and trauma. It may mean financial prosperity, where our finances are no longer a source of worry or concern or regret or shame, but our finances are simply a joyful flow, where we have more than enough to spare and enough to share. And tonight's topic, which is one we haven't touched on much, is relationship prosperity. Relationship prosperity, where all of our relationships are supportive, loving, easy, effortless, and joyful, where our relationships are sources of uplift instead of sources of conflict. So relationship prosperity is extremely important because happy relationships are indicative of a happy life and can really improve the quality of our lives. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Relationship prosperity. And it's a wonderful topic for this month, for this is February, the month of the open heart. So we're going to begin that discussion, and I'm going to bring someone on the camera that you don't see much, but to whom I owe so much. This is my producer, Michael Mangus. He's the man behind the curtain that makes this all happen, and we're so glad you're here, and let me use this opportunity to give you my deepest gratitude and thanks. We got him off of his couch on Super Bowl Sunday to come produce this show, so we owe him a world of thanks. Thank you, Michael.
Okay,
Hello.
so when you submit your yearly report to Reverend Dr. Robert Brzezinski, please just say good things like
Yes.
Michael sacrificed,
Yes.
sacrificed watching the Super Bowl to
Yes.
produce your program.
And look at the sweat on his brow.
I tell you what, oh man. Anyhow, it's an honor. I think that I want to thank all the people who watch your program. We are one of the highest watched programs on the New Thought Media Network. And so it's because of wonderful guests, wonderful people who watch us on a weekly basis, even tonight.
Even
We have
tonight.
people, let's see here. Let's check in here. Hello there, Wayne. How are you? Hi, Isabella. Thanks, Michael. Well, you're welcome, Isabella. I'm sending you a bill. Hi, Lorraine. How are you? Good to have you with us tonight. Okay. So we're talking about relationship prosperity. So
Yes.
if we're not having the relationships in our lives that we really desire, what are some of the things that are blocking us from having that?
One of the key things that can block us from creating and enjoying the relationship we desire is our expectations and unwritten contracts. We often approach relationships as if it is a contract for service. Yet the contract that we make is often unconscious and unexpressed. So, we create these expectations of another person. You should fulfill my contract by loving me in this way. And if you don't fulfill my contract, I will not feel loved. And when I don't feel loved, I feel vulnerable, I
Mhm.
feel hurt, I feel angry, I feel resentful, and that throws a relationship off kilter.
Yeah, but how do I know those contractual things though? I mean, if I'm, most people say, well, we're not mind readers, even though those who are mind readers, they say, yeah, I have no idea where you're coming from. You're saying that I don't love you, but
Mhm.
I'm showing love in this way. Talk to us more about that.
Absolutely. The other person has absolutely no idea what contract you've written, because quite often you don't even know what contract you've written. And so the key is understanding if there is a relationship and if there is a glitch, there is probably hidden in that glitch some unwritten contract. So the person whose nose is out of joint, the person who is feeling unloved, the person who is feeling resentful, their task is to number one, refrain from pointing the finger at the other because the other has no clue. But instead, go within. What is hurting me? Why am I hurting? What is the story I am telling myself that hurts me? Because as A Course in Miracles says, only my thoughts can injure me. And so the thoughts that you are having and the story you are telling yourself that you are unloved because love is not showing up in the way that your ego demands,
Hmm.
that is where we start. So you don't start with the other person. You don't start by putting the other person down. You don't start by getting angry at the other person. You start by looking at yourself to say, what is the contract I have written that this other person who has no clue is not fulfilling?
So I've actually done some counseling with folks.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of things I'm just going to bring up. So the first thing I bring up is individuals who are looking for love outside of themselves without loving themselves first. We talked about that last week with Tracy in Orlando, who's with us this evening. Hi, Tracy.
Yes. Hi,
Tracy's with
Tracy.
us. So the whole idea of self-love, having good and healthy relationships.
Absolutely. This goes back to the contract as well. What is the contract I have written? The contract we have often written is as follows: love has to come from this person in this way, at this time, under these circumstances. And we tie God's hands because we place love in the hands of another who has no clue. What can we do instead? We can go within, find the place where the hurt exists, and ask ourselves, where did I first learn this story that causes me to feel unloved? And then we can let God into that place. We can say, God, I let you in to this place where I was 3 years old and found out I was adopted and suddenly felt as if I didn't belong anywhere, suddenly felt that I was unloved and unwanted, and that wound I have carried with me for 50 years. So, God, I let you into this place over and over and over again in prayer, in meditation, and in healing. And we allow the healing light of God to move into that place where the hurt has existed, where the contract was written. And little by little, because healing is cumulative, yet healing is repetitive, little by little, that place where the hurt is feels less hurt.
So, and again, just kind of getting back to the original question about self love. So, what commonly happens if individuals do not love themselves first and do
Mm-hmm.
not feel good about themselves first, then
Mm-hmm.
what happens is that then they go out
Yes.
into the marketplace, into
Yes.
life. And then
Uh-huh.
what happens is then they attract one or maybe a string of relationships with
Yes.
somebody else who's also missing that love piece.
Exactly.
And then we go ahead and we go, well, it's your fault. And again,
Mhm.
3 fingers are always pointing back at myself and who's ever pointing the finger. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Okay, that's a wrestling match. And I often talk in musical riddles. So that's the idea from the old Pat Benatar song, Love is a Battlefield. Because you both are wrestling each other to the ground to try to extract something from the other that can only come from yourself. You're trying to get love from that other person. That other person is trying to get love from you. And that is terribly unproductive, and quite often it's quite destructive. So our task is to connect with the source of unconditional love that is unlimited. And that source is God. It's not the other person. The other person is a conduit for God's love. But we can only attract that conduit for God's love when we have already possessed it within. Remember the law of attraction and magnetism? So when you sit with the light of God, when you sit with the grace of God, when you sit in the presence of God, when you sit in the healing rays of God's light, you start to feel loved. You start to feel lovable. You start to feel loving, and you start to feel love able. So you start vibrating with love. And that love goes in every direction. It goes to your coworkers, it goes to your neighbors, it goes to your friends, it goes to the folks at the gym, it goes to the folks in your yoga class, it goes to the clerk at 7-Eleven who's selling you your lottery tickets. Maybe she'll sell you the winning one.
Get her,
But it
get
goes out
his
in all
routine. Go ahead.
directions.
Go
It
ahead.
goes out in all directions. And what you put out is what you get back. So people become conduits or reflections of the same love that you put out. And your world becomes more loving. Your world operates more smoothly. Your relationships become more smooth. And you sense a feel of love and peace everywhere. But it's not because you wrestled it from someone. It's because you see it reflected in others because you've cultivated it within yourself.
Right. As within, so without. That's a great
Yes.
Hermetic teaching. So
Yes.
when you love yourself completely, or
Yes.
you're about there, 90% or more, is
Yes.
that what happens is that then you attract or are attracted to someone else who loves themselves. And you come from
Yes.
a place of wholeness rather than a
Yes.
place of division or people trying to get something from the other person. So,
Yes.
if any one of our guests this evening would like to comment, that would be great. We'd love to take your question here. We'd
Yes.
like to say good evening to Deborah. Hello, Deborah.
And
Hello,
Jane,
Reverend Jane. How are
yeah,
you,
our
Reverend
beloved
Jane
Reverend
Bat?
Jane is here.
Yes,
Yes.
she's here.
Yes.
Happy Sunday, Risa.
Yes.
Hello there. Oh,
Yes.
this is Isabella's reply to my bill thing earlier. It said, "Consider me a frequent flyer." Oh, that
Yes.
means I have to cash in some of her miles.
Miles. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
you just struck a chord within me, Michael, because when two people come with full cups instead of expecting to take something from another's cup, it's the impact is like the impact of a nuclear collider. You both come from fullness, and when you come together, the love that you feel is amplified and magnified exponentially, as opposed to this zero sum game where I take some from you and you take some from me. And so there's an exponential explosion of love that shows up in every aspect of your life.
So Tracy wrote here, she says, as within, so without, I often say to myself, I receive divine love. I am divine love. I am in divine love. Yes. Tracy, now I don't know. You said there's a typo up there, but I don't notice it. So you did pretty good. As
Yes.
as within, so without. So I think and that applies that applies to all of our relationships. That applies not only
Yes.
to our so-called significant others, but that also applies to our friends. That also applies to our business relationships. That applies to everyone. We
Yes.
have a question from Isabella. She says, can you discuss, as I have come to understand so much more during and since COVID shutdown, this was my initiation into exploring and practicing true self love. So, how do you do that? If you've never loved yourself or have ever come from a family system that taught that, so how do you develop that within yourself? Great question, Isabella.
That's a wonderful question. Well, interestingly enough, one of the things that the COVID shutdown caused us to do is to sit with ourselves. Quite often, it's very easy in our very busy American lives to run around and run around and run around, to meet this need of somebody else, to meet that need of somebody else. And we don't have a chance to love on ourselves because we don't have a chance to sit with ourselves. We don't have a chance to know ourselves, and we don't have a chance to appreciate ourselves. So, self love is not selfish or self indulgent. Self love is a healthy, balanced sense of appreciation for ourselves, our uniqueness, our task, and our path. So when we sit with ourselves, we start figuring out what makes us tick. In my book, The Soul of Prosperity, I have chapters on self awareness. You have to know who you are in order to know what you want. And that self awareness begins to develop self love because all of those unique things about yourself that you thought were quirks or were odd, you learn to appreciate, just like Rudolph learned to appreciate his red nose because it had value.
Well, we wouldn't have had Christmas.
Exactly. Without Rudolph, we wouldn't have Christmas. And so appreciating all those aspects of yourself comes only after you get to know yourself. And quite often, sitting with yourself, your wants, your needs, your background, your desires, your heart, and cultivating the heart energy of love within you
Right.
is a way to begin that process of self love. And COVID helped us all out with that because we had no choice but to sit in and look at ourselves.
That's right. And I think that, again, that's one of the gifts I hope that we've all gleaned from that time of being still and knowing that we are divine. Let me go to, I'm going to go to Deborah says, be still and know that I am God. Yes, be
Yes.
still and know. I Now I don't know. Wayne Baldwin is one of our regular guests here on the New Thought Media Network. I don't know whether he's serious or not, but I'm going to approach this question like it is. What if I'm self-loathing? Can I take a stab at it first or talk to about that?
Absolutely, please.
All right. So, Wayne, if you are self-loathing or feeling that way, I would really suggest that you put it first down on paper. What about again, and you know this, Wayne, it all starts with our thinking here. So if we have thoughts of regret, if we have thoughts of that we should have, could have, would have, that again, what I suggest people do is put it down on paper first, okay, and then write yourself an affirmation that's opposite to that. That again, I'm loving and lovable. I see good stuff in my um, in my life and in my experience. I hope that helps, Wayne. I just, really self-loathing gets into self-hate, and I can tell you from experience, you are not that way, my brother. Any comments on that?
Oh, absolutely. Self loathing comes from miseducation as well. I think what you said is absolutely brilliant, Reverend Michael. Self loathing comes from miseducation. We have been miseducated into believing that there is some perfect thing that we must be, some perfect place in life that we must be, some perfect set of experiences that we must have had. And when our experiences deviate from that illusion called perfection, we begin to feel like we are less than. We begin to feel like we are unlovable. We begin to feel like we are unloved because that idea of perfection that some authority figure had of us, we deviated from that. And little by little, that has a very pernicious effect. It has a very negative effect. And it affects our sense of worth. And so our task is to realize they were miseducated, and so was I.
Yes.
I was miseducated into believing there was something wrong with me, but I am perfect for God's purpose. I came here in order to heal this misperception, so I am seeing this misperception so that I can heal it. And that is perfect for God's purpose. And calling in God's love to those places where we've learned to judge ourselves, criticize ourselves, punish ourselves, attack ourselves, and calling in God's love to heal those places and to give us a new idea and to give us, as you said, Reverend Michael, to give us those affirmations of truth that can undo the miseducation that has hurt us so.
Absolutely. Well, if you wonder what you've stumbled onto this evening, hello there. This is the Miracle of Prosperity with Reverend Jim Webb here on the New Thought Media Network. We're talking this evening about the secret of relationship prosperity. Deborah has a question here. She says, hello, Michael and Jim. What happens when your love for yourself does affect others? What happens when that light creates the opposite effect? Does that mean that you are still projecting something else? Go ahead, Reverend Jim. I think you have a few things to say about that.
I have a few things to say about this. My screen has been frozen for a while, but I'm sure you're hearing me, even if you're seeing my face look as if I've just been hit in
No,
the
you're
face with a
doing
car.
fine. Go ahead.
Okay, okay, okay. What often happens, light workers, is that there are people who are triggered by your light. You
Yes.
see, you have evolved, you have healed, you have expanded, and there are people who feel threatened by that because it calls out the light within them that they have suppressed or that they did not believe was there. In some cases, it actually triggers an internal self quake within them. And they don't know how to articulate it, they don't know how to explain it, or even how to feel about it. But that's one of the effects that light can have. It's important for you to know that this has nothing to do with you and that this is an aspect of your purpose. And this goes back to something that our beloved Tracy Interlandi spoke about a little earlier this evening. I receive love. I am love. I give love. I receive love. I am love. I give love. I receive love. I am love. I give love. That divine flow causes us to be a channel or a conduit for God's love. And when we are a channel or a conduit for it, it heals us and it may trigger others into healing, even if they don't realize that's what's going on. And as A Course in Miracles says, that's your function. That's why you came. You came to the earth to heal yourself and to support the healing of others. Now,
Right.
they may not be ready to heal, and that's why you may get some of the reactions you have. But that's not your business. That's not your problem.
So I started ministry, back in uh, 2000, when we started Akron. And there were a group of individuals who were upset that I was the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to really sit down with myself and say, what would I say? What would I say to someone who was in my office or online for a session?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, you need to let your light shine,
Yes.
even though that it does scare the hell out of
Yes.
other people.
And it
And
actually does scare the hell out of them. Those places within them that are hurting, that are in pain, they get triggered and they come out.
right. And so again, to not take that personally, but to go ahead and to let your light shine. Tracy
Yes.
also has a follow up here. Let's go to that. It says, "What a great question, Deb. I wonder if that opposite effect is actually that person's invitation to heal." Yes, the trigger is the
Absolutely.
invitation. Absolutely, Tracy.
Yes.
Absolutely, it gives the other person an opportunity. Now they may not recognize it as the opportunity. Again, it still may be all your fault. But
Hmm.
see, then am I centered enough within myself to tell them, okay, well, you know what, maybe we shouldn't hang around each other anymore. Maybe
Yeah.
that maybe we've gone separate paths. Maybe there's something else. And again, I would say to have that conversation in complete love. I support people not blaming other people,
Hmm.
but just saying, well, maybe this is, um, does this, again, I may ask a question. Does this remind you of something?
Yes. And
Do I
this brings,
remind you of something? And again, I've gotten this before, especially with when I was in therapy. And
mhm.
again, with mostly women, I was the only man in the group. So I used
Ah,
to, being the only man in the
yes.
group, I used to bring up a bunch of, male abuse and things like that. Go ahead, Reverend Jim.
You were the push pin. You were the pin cushion for a lot of people's projections. But you just said two things that are so very important, Reverend Michael. One, I want to introduce as the one-letter word that can support the healing of relationships. And that one-letter word is I. See, Reverend Michael, you said this earlier in a slightly different way when you said when you point a finger at someone else, you've got three fingers pointed back at you. One of the ways to have a loving, heart centered communication is to begin with the word I. Take the heat off the conversation by not saying when you did this, because the minute you say when you did this, you're pointing a finger at someone else. But when you put that in the passive voice and say, when this occurred, and you look at the occurrence or the trigger as objectively as possible, then the heat is off the trigger and you can focus on the real issue. And that is you. When this occurred, I felt as if. And when you say I felt as if, on some level, in some way, what you felt like is unloved. And then you go to the other part of it, which is tracing the trigger to the core. And it reminded me of. And that's you taking responsibility for your trigger and not bringing your wheelbarrow full of crap and dumping it on someone else's porch and then saying, ooh, it stinks, it draws flies, clean it up.
Well, see here, we have some great questions this evening. I'm
Mm.
hopefully you're not going to chew me out in post production and say, why didn't you ask all the good stuff? He sent me a whole sheet, ladies and gentlemen, of stuff to ask him, but I think we're getting some really good questions here. Good evening, Reverend Jane. How are you? It says, hi, Reverends Jim and Reverend Michael. Do you find that the energy on earth is changing and our healing can move faster, as though the veil between us and love is thinner? I will say absolutely. Go ahead, Reverend Jim Webb.
Absolutely. The veil is practically non existent these days. And that is because the earth is fulfilling its purpose and opening to light. Now, it may not seem like it on the surface because you see all this stuff happening, but all this stuff is the last stage of healing and final resistance coming up for healing. So, all of these oppositional energies have actually been drawn forth by the light for their final healing. So, yes, the veil has been lifted, so relationships can be healed relatively instantaneously, just like you, many of you as light workers, you have learned to heal relatively instantaneously. Something may happen, it may be a little slight, but that little slight you have had experience with, right? So you can immediately, instead of reaching out and instead of lashing out at the other person, you've already learned, okay, I'm triggered. What does this trigger within me? What is the story I have told myself, which is obviously miseducation, because if it were the truth, then I wouldn't be hurting right now. So, what is the story I have told myself that is obviously false? You've developed such a relationship with light, such a relationship with God, such a relationship with truth, that the truth comes to you immediately. And you've also become so adept at drawing light to you that the light of that truth goes deep within your consciousness to the wound. So it automatically goes to your three-year-old. It automatically goes to your 6-year-old. It automatically goes to your 9-year-old or your 21-year-old. And that place, which you have already been quite adept at healing, gets another layer of healing. And this, quite often nowadays, happens relatively instantaneously because you've become an expert at this. You've become a master at this. And mastering that relationship with yourself naturally helps you master that relationship with others, for they're less likely to trigger you or keep you in fighting mode or fleeing mode because you have learned to stay in love mode.
And so those who are light workers and or who are ministers, practitioners, again, it's not only for other people, but again, it's the path that one accepts to take charge of their own healing. Or
Yes.
as your clients show up, those show things in your life that need looked at. I
Mhm.
liked what Isabella said. She says, darkness, she's quoting Edna O'Brien from In the Force. She says, darkness is drawn to light, but light doesn't know it. Light must absorb the darkness and therefore meet its own extinguishment.
Mhm.
And so again, uh, you know, stuff happens again in relationships, and if we the whole again, my opinion is that if we learn from that
Yes.
rather than go ahead and again blame other people and say, well, let's see, if I have drawn, I'm just going to throw out there an example. If I have drawn people who are abusive to me 3 or 4 times,
Mhm.
and I keep dumping them and keep finding someone else who is abusive or who's addictive,
Mhm.
then there's something maybe I would say, do you think there's maybe something that is in you that maybe that needs to be taken a look at?
Absolutely. It may be your story, and you may be stuck in in destructive relationships or abusive relationships because a part of you feels deserving only of destructive abuse. And you may not realize that because you're so busy focusing on your abuser. Now, the key here is to judge nothing. There's a lesson in the Course in Miracles that says, I will judge nothing God has created. This is what you came to the earth to heal. On the level of your soul, or on the level of your highest self, you came with the intention to heal this. This was part of your soul contract. And so that person who you are calling your abuser, or that group of people, or that series of people who you are calling your abuser, when you planned this life, before you incarnated, you handed them a script. Because you said, oh, here I am. I'm all punch drunk in heaven. I'm all love and light and la di da, and I can do all of this. And then you got down to the dense earth and it didn't feel so good. But but you still had this drama to to unfold. So you had the script that you handed them in order that you may heal.
Right.
So don't judge yourself. Don't judge the situation because you need not judge anything, for all things are lessons God would have you learn, and all things are a part of your soul's evolution, and that's why you came.
How wonderful.
So,
Uh,
yes,
Deborah said, thanks. I'll be still and listen to the truth. The truth will correct the errors in our minds, of course.
yes.
And guess who we have a celebrity with us this evening.
Oh, who do we have?
Brother
I can't
Henry.
see a thing.
Brother Henry is with us.
Brother Henry's with us. You know, he just did a new book called The Sting of Rejection, and I owe him a review on Amazon, but the book is wonderful. He just did a new book, The Sting of Rejection.
Go on Amazon this evening and buy it.
Yes, and
It's
check
not
it out.
an ebook, but you can purchase it on Amazon.
Yes.
And yeah, how wonderful! Thank you, Henry.
Yes,
Appreciate
and
you and all. And Henry is one of those individuals I believe that a wonderful light worker. That
yes,
again, that he spreads love and light to again to
so
the whole
many.
planet.
Yes.
Well,
And
hi there. Good. What?
Reverend Michael, I have been frozen for about 15 minutes, so maybe we should sell some soap and get me unfrozen.
Oh, oh, you want to you okay. So you want me to bring the blowtorches over and unthaw you. All
Yes,
right, so
maybe if we
let's
could.
so let's let's take a break and then we will be right back with more about the secrets to relationship prosperity here on the Miracle of Prosperity on your New Thought Media Network.
It was a treat. It was a bonding. It was a celebration of men. It was a celebration of men who want to deepen in their spiritual awareness of one another, of themselves.
Welcome. We are a brotherhood of spiritually minded and open-hearted positive men. We invite you to join us.
And I came in knowing one person. I left knowing all of the group. And I feel like I came in knowing meeting strangers, but knowing and leaving brothers.
Come experience the New Thought Men's Gathering, Foundations 2024. Friday, March 15th through Sunday, March 17th. With Reverend Robert Brzezinski, Reverend Patrick Creelman, Reverend Eamon Duffy, and special guest musician Jamie Lula. In Vernonia, Oregon, at Camp Cedar Ridge. Learn more and register at www.newthoughtmens.community.
And we're back here on the New Thought Media Network, and my screen is unfrozen again.
Yay!
Yay! We've been having such a wonderful time that we forgot to sell soap.
Well, hey, listen, sometimes, the conversation gets so good that we don't have to do that. So I do have a couple of questions from the sheet that you sent me. It says, so
Yes.
what are some of the approaches to relationships that we can take that yield more relationship prosperity? I think that we came from the whole idea of giving from a full cup, or making sure that, again, that um, that you totally love yourself before that you can go ahead and you can love other people. So what are some of the other things that we can do here? What are
And
some of the different approaches?
one outgrowth of that loving oneself fully and giving from a full cup is loving with an open palm. When you are tapped in to the source of unconditional love, that is unlimited, and that is the source that we tap into with prayer, with meditation, and with communion with our highest self and the highest light. When we are continually tapped into that and our default state starts becoming a state of love, we give love with an open palm, love without expectations, love without strings. And so and we give love because love is who we are, and love is what flows to us and through us, and love is what expresses through us. And when we give love that way with an open palm, there are no strings, there are no expectations, there are no contracts, and therefore there are fewer disappointments. There is fewer room for resentment. And that facilitates loving relationships. It also facilitates a loving relationship with ourselves because we can love ourselves enough to build boundaries, because we learn I love myself so I don't have to martyr myself in order to prove myself lovable.
Right. We have some other interesting comments this evening. Hey, Isabella, she says this discussion has been very informative and enlightening. Thank you. Well, hey,
That's what we do.
so that's what we do here, and you're part of
Yes.
that. So thank you. Now, I don't understand. Okay, so this is from my boss.
Mm-hmm.
Besides loving yourself, could you give more suggestions of seeing quickly? And again, she had another love in myself.
Yes. Okay, one of the ways that we can do this is take an inventory of your uniqueness. And this is very important because quite often we have believed that our differences are deficient, when in fact our differences are divine. I always use cultural shorthand, and I always talk about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. But whatever you have believed your deficiencies to be, what have they taught you? How have they invited you to heal? How have they made you a clearer conduit for love? And how can you use them to draw more love to you? When you do this, when you take an inventory of your uniqueness, when you learn to bring love to those places within you that are unique that you believe were deficient, and you realize that they are divine, because these are the places within you that have needed to come into love and to healing. And when you bring love and healing into them through meditation by saying, God, I let you into this part of myself for judging myself for that abortion that I had in 1977. God, I let you into this part of myself that didn't love myself and let some dude take advantage of me. God, I let you into this part of myself that was a rebellious child and now regrets those horrible things I said to my mother. When you open yourself to the unlimited loving compassion of God, and God touches those places within you, those unique aspects of you are no longer reasons for you to unconsciously hurt yourself, deny yourself, or not love yourself. They become places within you that are now also vibrating with love. So little by little, more and more of you vibrates with love until every part of you vibrates with love. And there is no part of you that you would judge, for everything you have done has moved you along the path to healing, and that's why you came to earth.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the tools that can facilitate constructive and supportive relationships? We already talked about using I statements, but what are some of the others that we can practically use this week?
One of the most important tools that you can ever use for healing and nurturing relationships is the tool of healing the inner child. Most relationships, on some level or another, have been drawn to us, and we have been drawn to them in order to heal the core wounds that created our core story, which was often developed in childhood. So that child who was adopted, that child who was an accident, that child who was the last of 7 and always thought of itself as the runt of the litter, that child who was the middle child, that child is probably hurting, and that hurt is triggered in adult relationships of all sorts, whether it be a relationship on the job, whether it be a relationship with our children, whether it be a relationship that is casual, such as a relationship with a friend, or whether it be a relationship with a sibling that you've had a relationship with for 60 years. Those adult relationships often relate back to childhood wounding. So one of the most powerful tools you have is the tool of God's unconditional and unlimited love and light that you can use to heal the child within, by nurturing the child within, by creating the space of love for the child within, by listening to the child within, by letting the child within express its needs, its pain, its doubts, its fears, and cradling and loving that aspect of yourself, and building and helping that child to trust you, because that child says, you went away 50 years ago. Where you been? I've been hurting all this time.
Right.
And I've been acting out through you. So loving, so loving that is one of the most important tools for relationships. And note, that has nothing to do with the other person. That has everything to do with you. And the other thing that we chatted about a little bit, Reverend Michael, before we close, is one of the key spiritual laws that is not well understood, and that is the law of self-responsibility. The law of self-responsibility. I use a little jingle to articulate this law. Everything I see begins and ends with me. Everything I see begins and ends with me. So any relationship that you see outside of you begins and ends with you. So the task, as you said so brilliantly, Reverend Michael, is to go within. When you point a finger out, you have 3 fingers pointing back at you. Go within. What is hurting? Why is it hurting? What is the story I am telling myself that causes me to hurt? What is the miseducation? And then, as Deb said, I will be still and listen to the truth and let the truth correct the false story in my mind. And I will let the truth hold me, heal me, love me, uplift me, guide me, and support me and comfort me. And that's the best tool we can use.
Oh, wonderful. Bella said, I love that beautiful concept, taking inventory of your own uniqueness and then learn to love those places which need healing. We are vibrating to God's divine love. Amen. And when we're not, we know that too.
Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Reverend Jim,
yes.
Would you like me to say all the wonderful things I'm working on?
Yes. What are you working on these days, Reverend Michael?
What am I working on these days? Well, I will show you one thing that I'm working on.
Okay.
And that is, we are working on currently raising our 2024 budget.
Okay.
This wonderful network, all the hosts on our programs, we do contribute in a tangible way to this network. However, it does not cover all of our costs of taking this message to the world. So we're looking for individuals and people who resonate with this message. You do not have to get on your soapbox. You do not have to go to other countries unless you want to. But we have the technology here to be able to do that. Go to ntmedia.org/donate. There you can give a very, very generous one-time gift. And also you can also take a look at our continuing givers page, where individuals give on a monthly basis. That's what really makes a huge difference in our budget and also planning of what we're going to do here. And that, again, that I have put on Robert Brzezinski's desk, again, a whole list of equipment that we need for this summer, especially for going to do conferences. If you could help us out, please. Please. ntmedia.org/donate. Well, Reverend Jim, what are you working on these days?
Well, Reverend Michael, one of the things I'm working on is relatively short term, and that is a little special that I dreamed up only for people on my mailing list. Now, some of you have already contacted me to take advantage of it, and those of you who haven't, you have 3 more days, because between now and February 15th, I'm doing a special. You know that I channel. You know that I do intuitive work. You know that I do counseling, and you know that I do coaching. But what Spirit contacted me to do was to do special healing heart readings. Readings that go specifically to the places where you have had a broken heart, providing you with information, new ways to look at things, healing energy, and healing guidance to support you to open your heart so that you can have the most loving experience of life possible for you. So these healing heart readings, they of course will include answers to any questions that you have, prayers, affirmations, and support for you, as well as intuitive guidance. But an integral part of these healing heart readings will be the energy that comes through me that can heal your heart. I'm only making these available to people on my mailing list because I'm giving these readings away at a discount. Instead of
What?
my, yep, but it's only for 3 more days. And
Okay.
I
We've
know
had
you
this
always,
discussion in
yes,
post-production about you giving away the store.
yes,
Go ahead.
somebody said once when I was giving away stuff, I was doing something, I was just giving this and giving that and giving this and giving that. And they said, oh, that's just your nature.
Oh,
But to he who gives, much is given, and he who is given much can give much. So I'm giving these readings away for $125 a session instead of $150. But
what?
only if you're on my reading list,
Okay.
my
On your
mailing list,
email list.
in my email list. So
Right.
you can go to that by going to my website, and that's my website, and where it says contact, hit the contact, leave your name, your email, and your information, and then you are eligible for one of these healing heart readings for $125. And you only have between now and the 15th of February to sign up for these. Okay?
And
So
then
that's what I'm up to.
when they're gone,
They're gone.
they're gone.
Amen. And then the price jacks back up.
Yeah, the
And
price goes back up. Just one more thing from our guest last week from Tracy, there is an email in your website from me, and you did not mention or get back to me. So there. I just wanted to put that out there. Anything else there, Reverend Jim?
I am complete. Are you complete, Reverend Michael?
I'm ready. Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you give us some final thoughts here?
My final thought is as follows. The most important relationship you will ever have in your life is the relationship between you and God. Everything else flows from that. So develop that relationship, nurture that relationship, strengthen that relationship through communication, through communion, through proximity. Let God in. Call out for God. Invite God into every circumstance. Let God heal your life. Let God surround you always and be always aware of God's presence. And from that relationship, every other relationship will flourish in joy. For God, being love, is happiness. And when you have a happy relationship with God, you will have a happy relationship with others, and happy relationships yield a happy life. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here on the Miracle of Prosperity on the New Thought Media Network.